Hello, everybody. My name is Sai. Today, I have a special guest. His name is Josh Summers. Josh Summers is an acupuncturist, author, podcaster, meditation and Yin Yoga teacher. Since high school, he has been fascinated by the relationship between psychology, culture, and spirituality. This curiosity led him down the windy path of teaching, first as a school teacher in Taiwan and India, where he deepened his respect for yoga, Buddhism, and Chinese medicine to his life's work of teaching Yin Yoga, meditation, and practicing acupuncture. For over 2 decades, he has immersed himself in the practices of the Chinese medicine, Buddhist meditation, and Yin Yoga. He is passionate about how these practices support holistic healing for our fragmented selves and the world. He says, I am grateful for all the students I have been able to share the collaborative joy of the learning with. From the kindergarten to graduate school, from the soccer teams to law firms, from the ABCs to mental resilience, from the Yin Yoga to Chinese medicine, from the mindfulness to Dharma. Nothing gratifies me more than watching a student learn a new skill and run with it. Josh sees himself as a fellow path traveler, eager to share approaches and reflection that can support him on our unique journey. During the COVID pandemic 2020, he transitioned from teaching Yin Yoga trainings internationally to a more grounded, sustainable existence of the practicing and teaching from home. He now lives in semi-rural Maine with his love, wife, and inmate, Terry, where they teach online classes, workshops, retreats, and trainings in Yin Yoga, Qigong, and Yin meditation. In 2004, Josh received a master's in Oriental medicine from the New England School of Acupuncture in Newton, Massachusetts. His degree was a dual focus on Chinese herbology and Japanese styles of acupuncture. After school, he continued his studies with Kiko Matsumoto. Some of his books are The What, Why, and How of Yin Yoga, The Buddha's Playbook, co-written with Michael Brooks, The Power of the Mindfulness, Mindful Meditation Training in Sport, co-written with Amy Bolzel. And also check out his incredible podcast, Everyday Sublime, where he shares conversations and reflections about the full spectrum spiritual path. Welcome, Josh Summers. Welcome, Josh Summers.
Hi, good to see you.
seeing you. Oh, my dog have up. I'm so sorry. She just showed up here. So.
What's her name?
Brett.
Ah, beautiful.
Thank you. You have a puppy too, correct?
Not right now. No. My dog passed away about a year ago, but he's in our heart. He's well in our heart, and we're looking for another dog at some point.
I'm so sorry. I think I do remember the color and then the black and white, kind of like a doodle kind of puppy. Like that.
Yeah, a gray. He was a mixed, like sort of a collie and a schnauzer, a bearded collie schnauzer, we think.
What? I don't think I ever met that combination before. Okay, I'm very, very sorry.
I
Yes.
appreciate it. Appreciate it.
So I'd like to start with how I was led to you. I'm going to talk about some stories, so please be patient with me, but I think it's so important for me to speak about this. So how I was led to you was, so your Yin Yoga curriculum was gifted by another yoga teacher, Heidi Somatz, as a part of the 300 hours yoga teacher training course at Fresh Yoga in New Haven, Connecticut. I remember the large studio was filled with so many people from all over the states and the countries, and I got a little intimidated actually. And I had to trouble technologically accessing your materials, and you were so patient and kind to me. The specific subject of the program was learning about the Chinese medicine. So when I lived in upstate many years ago, being away from the city life, I got to encounter and starting a holistic approach, the way of feeding, looking at the many situations differently, especially for my dogs and cats. So one of the significant learning thing was about the Chinese medicine. That gave me spot on information on the timing of my dogs, for example, went through a bloat and urinary infections and another bloat actually also. So I became complete believer and then had a face to this theory. So I was so excited to take your course. And a more personal note, this is a medical things, but at that time, I was going through menopause, which started to prior to your classes, prior to taking your classes. And very first day of class, I got the period. I was shocked and then speechless. And that really gave me the reassurance of how wonderful that theory and what you're teaching. So I am so grateful for your work, and you are here to talk with me today. So thank you so much. That's how I was led to you.
Wow. Thank you, Sai. I was very to hear your memory of our connection was very touching. And yeah, it's incredibly gratifying when someone connects with something I care about, or something that Terry and I, my wife and I, share, and when that touches them and they're able to take it and make it their own and integrate it into their own unique journey. And then we often, as we say, we often learn back. We learn back from our students and our colleagues all the time. So it's very gratifying to hear your words. Thank you.
We cry. I think I cry all the time, but okay. So thank you for sharing that. That's so beautiful. I'm going to deep into the first question. So I'm very curious. Were there any specific, because I was reading your bio, and were there any specific events, any specific reasons that led you to connect with such a deep curiosity about psychology, culture, and then spirituality when you were in high school?
Yeah, I appreciate the question very much. I think this is the first time anyone's asked me publicly about that, and so thank you. Um, there were to answer your question specifically, I would say there were three events. And before I share those three events, I'll just say that the two broader contexts that were operating in my life were one of pain and struggle. And I would say that, like many people, I was growing up in a family that was dysfunctional and traumatizing for really everybody in the family dynamic. And through that misfortune, I was searching for answers to just bring my own inner well-being into alignment, and trying to make sense of things. But even amidst all that, I was also incredibly fortunate and privileged to be. I grew up in an area that had a great music system, in a town south of Boston, Marshfield High School, had a great music education. And just as I transitioned into high school from middle school, I joined a wind ensemble at the New England Conservatory in Boston. And in that first summer that I joined, the wind ensemble was taking a trip to China. And this would have been 1988. And so about, imagine about 70 to 90 musicians, toured China for 3 weeks that summer. And um, and then 2 years later, the same wind ensemble toured the still existing Soviet Union, with concerts in Moscow and St. Petersburg. And then I changed schools. I reclassified at a private school south of Boston, and there the music program had an opportunity for the jazz program, toured South Africa for 3 weeks. And all of those together brought a few things together in my mind. One was the incredible way that music was able to transcend cultural differences and connect in a realm of the spirit and heart that I had never experienced before. And I had those experiences in, like, the beginning of high school in China. I had those experiences in now Russia, and I had those experiences in South Africa. And at the same time, I was in each of those countries right before there was major political chaos and political upheaval. So I was in China just before Tiananmen Square. I was in Russia just before, or Soviet Union, just before the dissolution of the Soviet Union. And I was in South Africa just before apartheid fully dissolved. And I, so having been to these places, I was when these eruptions occurred, I was very interested in what was going on in society to cause these upheavals. And so from those early experiences, I've been interested in human psychology and how do humans flourish, and in some ways, what are the roots of human conflict and violence and war as we see in the world right now, and what what resources from our collective human spirit of our species. I was looking at music initially, but I've expanded that to include yoga and meditation and Chinese medicine to some degree. But what resources do we have in our collective human species that allows us to transcend our tribalistic instincts in our human psychology and evolve collectively to at least a more significantly empathic uh, development of moral imagination, so that our penchant for warfare, our penchant for conflict, our penchant for violence is mitigated, and we're able to function as a world species, really, as we are, or as a world culture. That's a big answer, but I mean, it's a great question.
Wow. So music was really putting all the thread together. So you started wondering about, we all connect through the music. Why this havoc and this chaos is happening? So you started wondering, you started having a curiosity about it. That got you to study the human psychology.
Yeah. And I want to be clear, I never studied psychology in university, but I would say psychological interests have motivated my own exploration. So in university, I studied anthropology, and particularly cultural anthropology, but we used a lot of psychological theory in that analysis of understanding our culture as a species.
Oh, that's interesting. Wow. Did you discover something that are very useful right now to your life at this moment?
Um, what I could say is that what would be a takeaway? Oftentimes, when there's human conflict, religion gets pointed to as the problem. The religion's to blame. It's someone's old ancient book that is calling for butchery and warfare. It's a side topic, but a friend of mine wrote a very fascinating book about this. And his argument is that no, in the history of cultural clashes or peaceful interactions, it's actually not the religions that determine how groups get along. It's the the kind of relationships that they're involved with uh, in day-to-day life. Are they in cooperative relationships, or are they in adversarial relationships where if I get one thing, you lose, and if you win, I lose? So um, so something like that, there's often this argument that religion's to blame. Like I've heard it, and I've even used that argument. But from anthropology, and particularly studying what they call primate politics, looking at dominant structures and gender relationships within primate groups, or different types of primate groups, we can see similar types of interactions that come in on board in the human species too. So that that penchant for tribal alliance or dominance over one or the other, that's not unique to humans. And understanding that more, the root evolution of our psychology, which could be referred to as evolutionary psychology itself, an evolutionary look at how our psychology evolved over millions of years, gives us, I think, greater insight into what's really at play in dynamics of conflict.
Mm.
So it's not a simple answer like, oh, it's because they're the other religion, and that's a simple response.
That's really deep and that's very interesting. I think that when we start follow our curiosity that way, and then it's something deep within us that awakening and wanting to be connected our truth, then I think our parameters started getting larger and larger. And then you started to wandering around this sphere or this eternal place, I think. So that can go to the rabbit hole anyway, I think.
Exactly.
Thank you for sharing this. Thank you. So now I'd like to ask you, I know I'm sure that you teach, you talk so many times, but I thought it was also interesting. Today I received your email, and then it's about the language, about the how to use. So my second question is, what is it in yoga for you?
Mm. Yeah. So what is yin yoga for me? What's
Yeah.
yin yoga about? Um, well, okay, I'll answer that at two levels. One is a practitioner and one is a teacher or a facilitator. So as a practitioner, it's just a person who has been interested in yoga, various kinds of yoga, uh, since my early adult life. Yin Yoga offers a unique way to um, influence the health and the vitality of our fascia. And I want to be clear, it's not the only way to influence the fascia. Anything we do, any kind of yang yogi you've ever heard of is going to influence the fascia. Every kind of physical training, just sitting around on your couch, all of that's going to influence the fascia. But yin yoga has a kind of uniquely specific influence on the fascia. And when it's combined with all those other styles of influencing the fascia, it becomes a tool that rounds out an integral approach to training, maintaining, or improving the holistic health benefits of well-trained fascia. So that's how I speak to it now on kind of the way I think of it as a physical practice that has holistic resonances through the energetic layers of or energetic dimensions of our being, as well as our what in spirituality is referred to as the heart dimensions, the contemplative heart mind dimensions of our being.
I have taken um, different classes in yoga before, and then after that, your courses, and then I really experienced yours specifically because you came from the acupuncture knowledge, and then also this Chinese medicine.
Mm-hmm.
I have never ever encountered in yoga like you do.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Well, thank you for the compliment. I appreciate that. I hope my head doesn't get too large here. Uh, the the second part of what I wanted to say was, well, the part two of my thing, which you prompted me back to come to, which I thank you for, is that professionally, I came to yoga. Sorry, I came to Yin Yoga through th the like three simultaneous doorways. So there was the doorway of yoga in general. I had been doing a lot of yang yoga, mostly Iyengar yoga, really enjoying that. But then when I went to a meditation retreat, my first silent meditation retreat, my body, I couldn't believe how uncomfortable my body was. And I felt like I was desperate, really. I was just desperate to find a way to sit more comfortably in meditation. And around that time, I had a student who had done some yin yoga training. She shared the practice with me. And once I got over my skepticism, I started integrating it. And when I went back on my next retreat, it was one of those explosion moments, night and day. Like I couldn't believe the difference, where I could just sit comfortably on the cushion and my body wasn't screaming in resistance. And a whole different understanding of meditation began to open up for me at that point. And at the time too, I was also studying or in sort of my process of becoming an acupuncturist. And so professionally, what I realized about Yin Yoga was that it was a way that as a yoga teacher, I could integrate my three broad passions, like the yoga side of my life, the meditative Dharma side of my life, and the Chinese medicine side of my life. And really, since that moment of realizing I could integrate those, the question is how? Like, what does integrating those things mean? And for me, it's been an evolving question. There's been evolving answers. I'm always kind of updating the way I try to think about the integration of those really tap roots of world wisdom, and how do we update them and apply them to our modern life, everyday kind of what we call the everyday sublime practice. How do we apply that to our own life?
I see. So what would you say for this? Because some people really never heard of what's the in yoga. And so what are some of the benefits that people we can experience practicing in yoga? What would you say?
So, um, first off, let's just define Yin Yoga as, in contrast to what it's often described as. And what I mean by that is physically, Yin Yoga could be classified as what's termed as passive static stretching. So when you come into a posture, you relax the muscles and you don't move. You're static, passively abiding that shape with the muscles relaxed, and doing that for maybe 1, 2, 3, or upwards to 5, 6 more minutes. You do that for several minutes. That's a passive static stretch. So some people say Yin Yoga is passive static stretching, but Yin Yoga has the word yoga in it, and yoga implies a whole range of inner conversations between you and your body, you and your energy system, you and your breath, you and your emotions and reactions and sensations and personal conditioning. Yoga is a conversation with all of that. So I would sit to say to somebody that if we look at the holistic impact of what's going on, namely when you come into a pose, as I described physically, with the muscles relaxed, and you stay still for several minutes, there's pretty good evidence that suggests, meaning there's pretty good research suggesting that this decrease sort of becomes a way of purifying, cleaning out, and rehydrating the tissue, and not just at a single layer level, but more at a global systemic layer throughout the whole body. So it's, if we think of the fascia as a three-dimensional sponge throughout the whole body, with layers and layers and layers and bags and bags and bags of wrapping of it, squeezing this can effectively help squeeze out metabolic waste, toxins from cellular metabolic process, and squeeze that out so it can be reabsorbed and excreted through the lymphatic system, and eliminated from the body. It also reduces inflammation in the tissue. So whether it's from working out or from stress or from bad diet, if there's too much refined food and sugary food, this will all cause inflammation. And um, these kind of passive static stretches, which Yin Yoga is not reduced to, but is included in, they reduce inflammation and increase hydration in the tissue. There's pretty good evidence for that. But when you layer in a manner of breathing, particularly what I think sometimes gets described as a yin pranayama, which I would define as a less is more. It's not a big gulpy, bellowy type of yang pranayama or dynamic pranayama. It's a more quiet, slow, soothing pranayama where some breathologists refer to it as the LSD breath, the light, slow, and deep breath. So you're sipping the inhalation, slowly exhaling. Now, it turns out when you get your body into that kind of a rhythm, the biochemistry of our blood starts to change. And we start to do two significant things in that we are preserving more carbon dioxide, which is the necessary molecule to act as a key with our hemoglobin, so that the hemoglobin transporting around in our red blood cells can release oxygen to our tissues and cells. So if we think of breathing, we always think about distributing oxygen, but it turns out to get the oxygen delivered well, we need to retain a certain amount of carbon dioxide. And we do that by the way we breathe, particularly when we lengthen the exhale relative to the inhale. So if we're breathing that way, we're now biochemically, the way I try to describe it, the fascia is the medium through which our energy is flowing. Well, here's a pretty concrete way that when our fascia is, the medium of our fascia is less inflamed, less dirty, more hydrated, cleaner, and then we're breathing in a way to optimize the delivery of oxygen, the medium through which that oxygen is being delivered is more coherent or open and receptive to receive and release. And of course, this breathing method also increases nitric oxide in the blood, which is a vasodilator and has immune benefits associated with it. So we're relaxing our blood vessels, lowering blood pressure. And all of that combined is going to bring the body more into a parasympathetic state where we're going to be able to digest our food better, get better sleep, recover, replenish our energy more. And sort of at those different layers, I see Yin Yoga collaborating in a number of significant ways to, from a Chinese perspective, I would say, collaborate with the holistic functions of the Chinese medical organs to optimize our health through circulating and enhancing the vibrancy of our energy. So that's what how I describe Yin Yoga, as a yoga, not as just a passive static stretching, but as a yoga. It's going to, at minimum, it's going to have the physical side of what we're doing with our body, the subtle energetic side of what we're doing with our breath and our perception of how we feel that in the body. And then we're also going to be layering in, if we meditate within the experience, we're layering in intention. So heart
Mm.
intention. And all of that is sort of the three broad layers of a yoga, of a complete yoga. And I think Yin Yoga as a side of practice um, allows us to, again, optimize and easily realize many of these benefits, because it's a very accessible practice. So we do Yin Yoga and combine it with the other fascial fitness principles and fascial fitness orientations or methodologies. Then one's energy really starts to hum, to enliven.
We all need it. I think we all need. Imagine that what you experienced when you're high school through the music you traveled, and then you saw this chaotic, this such a hard culture life. If the old people were doing something like this in yoga, what the world would be so different now. So I feel
Well,
like
can I say something about that? Because I did, I think about a year or two back now, I wrote a book called um, something like it's like a dreamer's dream, is I think what I called it, a dreamer's dream. And it was just about like, can Yin Yoga help foster world peace? A dreamer's dream. And all I was trying to, my main point, I just want to say this, is that um, my wife tells me that Yin Yoga is one of the most like popular forms of yoga now. Like it's risen into the top 10 of popular forms of yoga in the world, which to me is crazy because I never would have thought that when I learned it 25, 30 years ago. But given its popularity, one of the things that's motivating to me is that it's almost a grassroots way to, in a non-dogmatic way too, but it's a grassroots non-dogmatic way to share skills that help regulate the human experience. You know, when people, that's the thing about the practice, when we're like, they find that it gets them very calm.
mm,
You know?
yes.
So I got a tickle in my throat.
Yes, I totally agree. And then the benefit that I received, I prove really like it was like incredible. So I cannot imagine. It's the time is, I'm so sorry I went over than I promised. So this is now coming down to the last question. I think as a wrap up while we are talking, um, what is your message for the humanity now?
I'd be the question scares me because I would feel like I would trying to sound like a messiah or something if I had a message for humanity, other than to love thy neighbor, or some wise words that someone else had already said. I think part of it's more my worldview, that intersects with my professional world, which is that my worldview is kind of what I already described, that through my understanding of human evolution and cultural evolution, I really think our species is at as an existential breakpoint. That there are global level uh, catastrophes, whether it's what's going on in the Middle East right now, or in the Ukraine, or potentially in China and Taiwan, or if it's related to pandemics that are man-made, biologically made, Star Wars, AI, climate change, migration due to climate change, food disruption, all of these things are globally interrelated now. And I know there's a big political backlash against globalism, but I agree with my friend Robert Wright that our species is culturally moving into greater and greater spheres of interdependence. What happens in China affects us. What happens here affects Australia. We're all interdependent. And if we're going to collaborate to address issues that are of an interdependent nature, meaning if we successfully deal with climate change, if we successfully deal with the threats of AI, we will stand the chance to survive one of these meteors when they hit us. We'll stand the chance to come up with like a collaborative implementation of a solution of some sort. And what stands between us from doing that kind of collaborative work at a global level is, again, this obstacle of human tribalism, or the issues of human tribalism in our human psychology. And I'm paraphrasing Bob Wright's thesis that what's interesting is that if people practice something like mindfulness, what's in their own self-interest, calming themselves, making themselves more peaceful, less reactive to stress, that's their own self-interest, but it becomes like their own enlightened self-interest becomes something actually that's a gift to the world too, because when people are individually less reactive, better and calmer, and able to take perspective, not to agree with, not to endorse, or to even believe or sanction, but just to take another perspective to the point that you can understand how someone else sees something, or how another side sees something. In my mind, if I had one message, what I've learned from my relationship with my wife, what I've learned in relationship to my Sangha, what I've learned in relationship to all my main relationships, that the resolution of conflict lies and begins with the ability to take the other person's perspective. The inability to take the other person's perspective leads to escalating conflict. And I can see that in my own personal life. I can see that at the macro level of international disputes. So anything that allows us as a species to cool the inner flame, whether it's the inflammation in our tissue, the inflammation in our psyche, cool the inner flame so that we can see more clearly, take the different perspectives, and navigate our needs to greater solutions that are better, or, accounting for as many needs as possible, as it's inclusive as possible.
Mm.
So thank you for that question. That was, I don't want to, again, I apologize for any whiff of a messianic sound, but I'm scared like everybody. I'm very scared about our future. And in light of that very real fear, I'm just a yoga teacher in some ways, but given the popularity of Yin Yoga and the immense spread of things like mindfulness-based stress reduction, I would like, what if a mindfulness-based conflict reduction was an implicit outcome of people just doing more and more Yin Yoga?
I agree. I totally agree. I totally agree. Well, that's so beautiful. I totally agree everything what you said. So thank you so much. How people can connect to your work? I'm gonna put your podcast, the description, and your website. Is that the best place to connect with your taking your course and everything? Is
Yeah,
that
sure. My website, which is my name, but it's the wife. It's the website for me and my wife, Terry. And on YouTube, we have a channel, Josh and Terry Summers.
I will put everything in the description below. So this is such a heartwarming Thank you so much for this interview. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Sai. I really appreciate your questions and
Thank
just being able to connect with you again. Thank you.
Thank you. Namaste.
Namaste.